So, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Welcome to MSC IPP series video number 7. My name is Lieutenant Jg Herrera, and I'm here with some wonderful individuals, and later they're going to introduce themselves here in a little bit. We have Ensign Lyndon Weber. We have a brand new Lieutenant JG Select Fortune. We have Lieutenant JG Miles and Ensign Herrera, all here, all recent selectees for the MSC IPP program. We're here to answer your questions. We are currently live right now, so we're also going to filter some questions as well. That I'm monitoring it right now. I'm guaranteed that we have a stable connection, so we'll monitor this live feed as well. So please, if you are watching or just tuning in, post your questions below on the comments, and I will try my best to answer them as well. So before we begin, I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves real quick. We'll start with Ensign Weber, and we'll go from there. Ma'am?
Hey everyone, I'm Meredith Weber, ensign type, prior HMC, been in the Navy for 13 years, 14. Stationed at Camp Lejeune. I'm part of Naval Dental Center Camp Lejeune, so the blue side. Yeah, excited to be part of this. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, appreciate it. JG Miles?
Greetings, everyone. My name is Kiana Miles. I am currently stationed at Naval Health Clinic Quantico. I'm the department head for healthcare business, and I am actually a prior HMC. I've been in 8 years total now.
Thank you, appreciate it, ma'am. JG Select Fortune?
Hi, how's everyone doing? My name is Lieutenant JG Select Fortune. I have been in the Navy for 10 years. My previous rate was MM1, or is MM1 still until I get commissioned. And I'm currently stationed at TSC in Great Lakes, going through sea school before I check into my next command, which will be the USS Truman in Virginia.
Awesome, thank you so much, and welcome, future ma'am. Sir, Mr. Herrera?
All right, how you doing, everyone? So I'm Lieutenant Jg Herrera, Snyder Herrera. I'm currently at Fleet Surgical Team 7 in Okinawa, Japan. I've been in the Navy 18 years, prior HMC type. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Belay my last. I said Ensign Herrera. Belay my last. It's Lieutenant JG. That one bar. Hey, that upgrade to silver bar matters, okay? Sorry about that, sir. All right, so without further ado, we're gonna go through these questions. They're very, it's very common as what you would expect from like we mentioned, just to give everybody a brief. If you're now just tuning into our episode, we started with an overview of the MSC application, and now we're like chopping it piece by piece and inviting panels on here to kind of give their perspective. So we started with the CO recommendation, and we had two very important leaders in the community that gave their perspective about CO recommendation, and then you heard from Lieutenant Commander Mo Taylor about letters of recommendation. Then we heard from two senior MSC last week, two senior MSCs about interview appraisals from their perspective, right, as senior MSCs. And now you're hearing from the recent selectees of all of us here, I believe, just got selected over the past 2 years or the very recent years. So it's still fresh in our mind. I remember still personally preparing for that one, my very first application. I was extremely nervous. I was in sailor of the quarter mode, and a lot of people go into that mindset that it's a sailor of the quarter mode. And I'm here to tell you right now, and I know the panel will echo this as well, it is nothing like sailor of the quarter. It is nothing like what you experience in like the enlisted type setting. But we'll go more in depth with that one with this panel as well. So the first question, and we'll start with Mr. Herrera right here. What did you do to prepare yourself for these interview appraisals? Is there anything special that you did, sir?
So in preparation for the interview appraisal that I had, so you did, hold up, before I get started, you did ask how many times did I apply? I applied once, and I was selected FY or 18. So anyway, back to the so in preparation, I just familiarized myself with what was going on in the community, what was going on in medicine, what changes were coming up, the SG's guiding principles at the time, and kind of immerse myself in, uh, the current happenings in Navy medicine, and what are the issues day to day.
Awesome. So current events that's happening within Navy medicine. Perfect. Thank you. JG Miles?
Yes, very similar to what Lieutenant Jg Herrera just alluded to. I also prepared this handy dandy binder. So this was my MSC IPP binder. In this binder, I included copies of my package. I included my curriculum vitae, my resume. I also made sure that I included business cards to give my interviewers after the interview. So this was like my go-to. And I also would pre-write questions as well. Um, After the interview, I'm sure we'll get more into that later, but they always ask if you have questions. And no, it's not a great answer because there's still a lot for us to learn and understand. So I always made sure that I pre-wrote questions to ask as well. So that was kind of my process for preparing.
Thank you, ma'am. And also, for those of you that are not digging through our MSc IPP files, JG Miles posted at the very beginning, like her checklist to prepare for the application. It's stellar. I personally give it to my mentees because she broke it down as well on what you need to start looking for, start your binder. So that's perfect. So if you haven't gone to our file section, go over there. JG Select Fortune.
You guys made some very great points. And I know for me, one thing that I did to prepare myself was just to always make sure that I had a quiet background and that, I made sure that my 5-year-old wasn't running around in the midst of my interview. Because I know around the time when I was doing my interviews, it was COVID and school was out. So I had to try to balance that along with preparing for my interviews. So always making sure that I had a quiet space. And Ms. Miles touched on a very good point about asking questions. I know for my boards, once we were always done, I would always ask at least 2 questions pertaining to things that were going on in Navy medicine to try to help me understand. Or I would even try to get more in depth and even ask maybe a personal or professional question, especially if they were a prior Mustang. Well, definitely prior Mustang, and try to see how their transition was from the enlisted side to the commissioning side. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Ensign Lighten
You're
Weather.
welcome.
How did I prepare? I will say that I had an interview that I wasn't prepared for. So, looking back now, I was at PERS, so I was removed from Navy medicine. So I was completely oblivious to the whole DHA transition. So
Mhm.
after that interview that I had, I completely changed my focus and made sure that I was abreast with everything going on.
Mhm.
So I think, and I had talked to like other friends in other areas that were sitting on boards trying to also put in a package, and they're like, oh yeah, they asked me what all the subspecialties are and how many we have, and thankfully I didn't get asked any of those questions on my first interview because I would have failed miserably because I just didn't know going in, being so removed from Navy medicine. So um, I wasn't prepared. I wish I had been. That's all I currently say about the preparation.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think everybody kind of had the same answers in terms of the general theme is that you need to be abreast of what is going on. It's, I think Commander Mo Taylor echoed this. The 2 senior MSCs that we had last week echoed this. You need to know the job that you're entering. And if you don't know our history, if you don't know anything about August, if you don't know what a twig is and why is that important to us, if you don't even know that there's clinical scientists and administrative side to MSc, then you're probably behind a power curve. And just so for those that are listening, the questions are very, and we're going to go through this here in a little bit. They're not all the same. Some there's MSc officers that are very information specific, like they want you to know the current, like what's in the book kind of thing. There are ones that are very situational. They like putting you in certain specific situations and like, okay, you're the devo, I'm your CO, how are you going to do this type of situation. So it's always a different thing. And for those of you that know my story, I did apply 6 times. And I'm telling you right now, all those appraisals during those 6 times, very different. It's almost like a brand new interview each person. No single MSC had the same question except the generic why do you want to commission and stuff. So thank you for those answers. Next is, what is the hardest question that was asked to you? Let's start with Mr. Herrera again. What's the hardest question that kind of put you at like, oh, that's a great question. Oh, I think you're in mute, sir.
So what's the hardest question I got asked? Well, kind of, it wasn't a difficult question, but it's more of a, you have to, I don't know, it was, the question was, you know, you were at an HMC at the time. Why do you want a commission to be an officer? Like, what is that gonna, why do you want to make that transition? So that was one that, you know, you had to, you know, that question is coming, right? It's not that it's a hard question. The question, you know, it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter who's going to give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of being prepared to answer it articulately, and what it is that the difference between an HMC or even a HM1, HM2 to a Lieutenant JG ensign. What is the impact, the difference in the impact that you can make, you know, and be able to speak to that.
Awesome. Thank you. And there's a lot, and you know, just looking at the list, there's a lot. There's a Master Chief that got selected. So I can just imagine he was asked that question because, you know, he's used to training junior officers but now that he's a junior officer. So for those of you that are still in the mess wearing the anchors, that question will probably pop out as well. So thank you for that, sir. JG Miles, hardest question.
So I wouldn't say this was a particularly hard question, but it is a question that I definitely want to mention. And like you mentioned earlier, as far as them asking situational questions. So one of the questions I was asked was, as an officer, if you see your peer doing the wrong thing, would you be willing to speak up? And hearing that question, one's initial response would be, yes, of course, I would be willing to speak up. But when I responded to the question, I said, yes, I would be willing to speak up because it's no different from me being an HM2 now. If I see one of my peers, you know, doing something wrong as an HM2, I would, you know, carry out the actions the same way as far as speaking up. And the feedback that I got from that question was, wow, we actually have not heard that question answered in that way in particular. So that gave me a little insight. And what they were looking for was, okay, what are you currently doing now? And is that going to differ from, you know, when you actually make that transition?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are doing the right thing now, you should continue to do the right thing when you're making that transition. So just making sure that you listen to the questions and that you are articulate about your responses because they're listening. I'm sure based on their feedback, most people said, yes, of course, you know, I would speak up as an officer, but just, you know, given that little extra, well, yes, I would, because actually I'm already doing this. So I think that's important. Be articulate in your responses and listen to the questions that they're asking.
Very good. Thank you. JG Select Fortune.
So I would not say that the question that I was asked was difficult, but it was more so caught off guard. Coming into all of my interviews, I'm expecting, you know, the questions about the subspecialties, about, you know, why not stay an engineer, why cross over to the medical side. But one particular interviewer asked me if he were to go on any of my social media accounts, what would he see? And I was blown away because here I am, you know, dressed up in my white. My mind is going 100 miles per hour thinking about all these DHA answers and all this other stuff. And now I have to think about what's on my social media. And he brought up a very good point that, you know, coming into this role, crossing over from enlisted to commission, now you're in a leadership standpoint regardless, but now you're looked at a higher caliber. So how is it going when you have an attendee that is looking at your Instagram page or your Facebook page and they notice, oh wow, Lieutenant or Lieutenant JG is on the beach in her bathing suit. What kind of perception is that going to give younger sailors?
Mhm.
So, and it's funny because I actually started cleaning up my social media page when I became a mom. So I really didn't have much that was on there outside of whatever hobbies that I had. So even with now this selection, there was even some things on there this week that I was like, you know what, let me go ahead and clean this up a little bit more. Even though the pages are private, it's still something that I know it's out there. So
That's true. I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually had the same experience as well. I thought he was going to do it. I'm not going to name it, but he was a DFA. And he's like, well, I have my phone here. I'm going to pull you up right now on social media. What am I going to see? And I'm a meme guy. For those of you that are my friends on Facebook, I love memes. So I was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I was not prepared for this at all. So I'm glad you brought that up because that can happen as well. So, because you represent the medical service corps, and that's a lot of people think it's like my life. Nobody can control me. This is freedom of speech, but you're in the military. So thank you for bringing that up. Ensign Weber.
Yeah, I think mostly any question that I got asked that was difficult was like why I was doing it and how I would feel leaving the Chief's mess, and being truthful in those answers, like Lieutenant Jg Herrera had talked about. That was probably the hardest thing to be able to articulate without sounding like I don't know what the right term to use is, but without making it seem like you were doing it for the wrong reasons, like, because a lot of people are doing it for the money or, to better their family. So you have to be able to articulate yourself and know your why before going into it. So that way you can properly display yourself to whoever's interviewing you.
Very good.
Because,
Awesome.
and to caveat off of that, like those generic responses that people give, like the board, your interviewer doesn't want that. They want to know like really why you're there and what your purpose is. And it's okay to say, I'm doing it because I want to better my family, but also, you want to better the Navy and you want to better Navy medicine. So it's okay to be selfish in your responses, but also be doing it for, the right reason as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And that's good. Being truthful is a very important factor on here because they can sense they've done this a long time. So they will sense if you're just, creating an act for them. And I think for me, the most challenging question to me was a captain in BUMED who asked me a question about my grade that I did not expect because I already had my master's. And I think I kind of mentioned this in the last video. And he asked me, it's an F from a philosophy class that does not matter to me personally, because I had like 2 degrees in front of that already. But he dug through it, which shows that he actually scrubbed my record. And he said, "What would you change? Would you change this F?" And of course, I was like, you know what, sir? Yes, I would. If I had the chance, I would actually take it seriously and not just count as philosophy. It's like, I'm gonna stop you right there, Chief. You should have said no, because if you changed it, then you wouldn't be where you're at right now. Changing your past alters your current state, so you wouldn't be the chief you are right now. And I was like, ugh, mind blown, right? So be prepared. Sometimes they give you instant feedback right away. And speaking of feedback, we have a question from our live audience. It says here, if you were a non-select, is there a process for finding out from the board on the reasoning why or what to work on? Has any of you tried that route of finding it out? Let's start with you, Ensign Weber. Have you tried that aspect, or do you know of any?
Well, I got selected my first time, so I can't actually say like I sought out anything. But I think the best thing from just being in the Navy for a little while is to seek guidance from mentors that you trust and I didn't just have, MSC officers look at my record. I had my master chief look at my record and I had my senior chief look at my package before I submitted it. So seeking guidance from people that you trust and who will give you honest feedback, I think is the best thing to do. You're never, unless someone from the board like tells you, which they are sworn not to, you're never going to find out what stopped you from being the one that was selected. So I would just seek feedback from people that you trust and that you look up to, and go outside of your comfort zone too.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am. JG Miles?
So I was not one of those fortunate superstars that got selected on her first try. Took me 3 times, but I will say my process for seeking feedback, I would always reach out to Miss Kemp. Miss Kemp is a great, great resource. And she would actually, give me feedback on my package. She will also review your package. So just making sure that, aside from what was previously mentioned, contacting your mentors and reaching out to your senior leaders, I would also recommend that as a course of action as well. Reach out to Ms. Kemp. She has a lot of insight, and she kind of knows. She's been doing this for a while, so she knows what the board is looking for.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am. Miss Fortune?
I would definitely say that Ms. Miles is a great resource. And the reason why I say that is because I actually reached out to her as well my second time up, which is when I got selected. The first time, I really didn't communicate with her as much. But my second time, when I did go ahead and ask her, hey, Ms. Kemp, do you mind if you just look over my package? Just make sure I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's. And she messaged me back and pretty much told me that, I had a captain's mast annotated in my application, and she wanted me to go ahead, or she recommended that I explain that in one of the blocks in my application, which I hadn't done in the first application. So I think that was a great thing for me to do, because now I can clear up any type of speculation, any kind of what ifs or whatever doubts that the board members may be having when it comes to looking at that section where I'm listing that NJP and wondering, well, what happened and, what was the solution and everything else from it. So Ms. Kemp is a very huge resource. And then I did go ahead and reach out to other mentors and have them review my package as well. But one thing I did have to keep in mind, that even though I was getting all these inputs, I did have to remember that this is my package, and, this is my personal statement. This is me. So even though I'm getting those critiques, you have to really pick and choose, well, what do you feel comfortable with going with? So.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Fortune. Mr. Herrera?
I'll definitely echo what everybody said. I'll add to that is, we all have mentors and people we reach out to, we trust. Let them see the packages, let them see what you wrote, what you submitted. And also, if you've been researching the MSC community, you should know who the heavy hitters are. You should know who these senior officers whose service reputation precedes them, and they're pretty known in the community. Those are the people that you should probably be reaching out to get some honest feedback on your package. So that's kind of what I would add to that.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And again, to echo Commander Mo Taylor, retired, it's like a gang, right? For lack of better terms. And it's almost like, okay, how do we know you're fit for this? And in a gang, right? I'm not saying I know gangs like bad in the Navy, but there's like certain things that they're trying to look for. And there's like the grandfathers as well that you're trying to seek. And by that's what Ensign Jg Herrera was like trying to get at, is that you want to seek these people that are reputable, that is very well known in the community, that if they write something for you, they can vouch for you. So, right. So we got a couple more questions on here. So I know who to ask these questions for my panels. Raise your hand if you have interview anxiety. Okay. So okay. So Miss Fortune. So this I get, and Miss Miles and Miss London Weber. How do you deal with interview anxiety?
So dealing with interview anxiety, I really had to learn how to be able to answer questions like that. I think with me having my interview anxiety, I would just start blurting out certain things, and then it wouldn't make sense at all. So one of my mentors actually advised me to look into Toastmasters.
There you go.
And that was the biggest change in my public speaking. I was already a recruiter. So being a recruiter, you already have your spiel of what you're going to say, and you already get the same questions over and over from the high school students. So you're kind of already, your mind is already programmed to answer and speak a certain way. But having to answer questions impromptu about MSC, it really was challenging for me. So Toastmasters International helped a lot with that. The group that I was in Georgia, they're amazing. So
Yes.
that's how I was able to deal with that.
Awesome. Thank you. JG Miles?
I definitely second Toastmasters. That was a huge help for me as well. Aside from that, I think, we talked about being prepared. Being prepared is key. I think the more prepared that you feel, the better that you end up doing in the interviews. Also, remembering hand placement. So that is a thing for me. I talk with my hands often. So I was always very conscious of that. And just made sure that I had my hands under my cover, because usually I was in a dress uniform of some sort. So just being mindful of those little things, I think definitely will help. And then last but not least, just finding those opportunities while you're still enlisted to public speak, whether that's to your peers, whether that's to your junior sale of the quarter. Those are things that actually prepare you for these types of interviews. Well, questions may not be the same, but actually just having confidence to get up in front of people, definitely great practice.
Awesome. Thank you, JG Miles. Ensign Leidenweber?
I think I just had to tell myself that it's okay to be a human being. And so I would go, and although I get nervous talking in front of everyone, but I've learned that the best thing that I can do is just be myself. And if people don't like it, then that's not my problem, that's their problem. And so I think going through chief season kind of helped me with that. And when I put in my package, I had been a chief for a little while. So I kind of learned just to have emotional intelligence and to articulate and know what I'm talking about. And that's kind of how I got over it. I don't think those nerves necessarily ever go away. You just learn that you're okay with who you are and what you're bringing to the table.
Awesome. Thank you. And two of the three mentioned Toastmasters, and I'm just going to echo that as well. I'm a firm believer of Toastmasters. I think I got introduced to this when I was an instructor already in San Antonio, Texas, and I recommended these to my instructors who are very shy and doesn't want to leave the podium. That's always like stuck there and shakes when they're in front of people. I'm not sponsored by Toastmasters. I do not have stocks in Toastmasters. I didn't even know they have stocks. But one thing that Toastmasters forces you to do is you have strangers that actually give you constructive feedback. They tell you, hey, you have spider fingers. Instead of say you have like 16 ums while you were answering that question. And one thing that helped me with my interview appraisal was they call it the what was that called? It's the impromptu feedback session, to where you pick a question, they pick you, right? Like, Aaron, come here. And then you pick a question from the hat, and you have about a minute to talk about it. It could be anything. You could be telling the truth, you could be telling a lie, but what it forces you to do is it allows your creative side of your brain to speak right off the bat with impromptu questions, right? Like, I remember they were asking, okay, what would you, Bill Gates is right beside you right now. You have 1 minute to talk about anything with Bill Gates. And it what do I say? Like, that's the first thing that you come to mind. But just think about it. When you are in an interview appraisal, they could ask you anything in the world as well. And you want to be articulate as much as you can, and at the same time, confident and knowledgeable still. So that's why I'm a firm believer of Toastmasters, and practice makes perfect as well. So for that one. All right, so we have a couple more minutes, so I'm entertained 2 more questions on this one, and I think this is specifically for you, Miss Fortune. As someone outside the HM rate, how did you show you're capable? For instance, this person is an MA, and you're a perfect person to answer this, I think.
So one thing that I think that set me apart was the fact that I actually went out of my way to shadow an MSC officer down in Albany, Georgia. During that time, my command, they restricted us to a 50-mile travel limit. So I went head over heels to try to get this shadow time in with Commander Powell's that was down in Albany, Georgia at the time. I think that experience not only opened up my eyes, but it allowed him to see that I really was determined and really wanted it. Another thing that I did during my process was keeping in contact with my mentors that I met along the way. And just as Jg Herrera said before, you want to be able to know who's who in MSC. And for me, actually doing the research, stalking people over LinkedIn, not really, but contacting people over LinkedIn, I can tell you I have never been in the MSC group and asked, hey, I'm trying to get in contact with an HCA officer in the area. Can anyone help me out? I never did that. I went ahead, went to a clinic's website, looked at who their leadership was, found them on LinkedIn, sent them a DM, and tried to keep it personal. So that way I can build that personal relationship. In turn, with me building that personal relationship, not only was I able to gain a mentor, but now that person wants to write a letter of recommendation for me. So I didn't look at every person that I met as an opportunity for a letter of recommendation or, hey, this is someone that's going to do my interview appraisal. I looked at them as this is someone that is going to work with me when I become an MSC officer.
Awesome.
Another thing that I did, I went ahead and reached out to other public health organizations so I could just understand more about public health, because even though I majored in it for college, I still was turning wrenches and I still was recruiting applicants. So being in that public health field allowed me to kind of engulf myself and get an idea and a feel for healthcare.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those were great tips. And I like how you said the personable aspect of it. And also, every person that you meet is not a paper. Like, he's an interview appraisal. He's a letter of recommendation. And this is just me. This is Aaron speaking. And that's one thing that I tell individuals, like when you're in like these pages, like for example, in this group, we have 1,800 people, probably about like 600 of these individuals are officers. So the way that you speak in these groups and how you ask for a mentor, there's a certain way for that. And we'll have a totally different topic for networking and I believe there's a proper way for the networking aspect of it because we're so used to just like social media where we want instant, hey, anybody in Bremerton, I need a HCA mentor. There's a proper way for that, but we'll save that for a different episode. But since we're getting to our timeline, I want to go to the round table, starting with Jg Herrera. Your biggest advice to our aspiring MSCs as they go through this journey of submitting an application. Results just came out. It's another round for some individuals. It's the first time for certain individuals. What is your biggest advice to these aspiring MSCs?
I would say not to be discouraged. I was fortunate. I was selected the first time, but that's not the case. There's a limit to how many people can get selected each cycle. So sometimes it's a quota limitation. It's not that you're not qualified or you're not good enough or anything along those lines. Sometimes it is a quota limitation. So stay on top of your game. If this is what you want to do, then stay focused. Right? Go back to the drawing board, refine your package, scrub your package, reach out to your mentors, like I said, and everybody. I don't know. I would say, for me personally, I only had select people look at my package, and then not everybody looked at my package. It was maybe 2 or 3 people that gave me any type of feedback, and I made changes or corrections to. So kind of go back to the drawing board and resubmit. Don't give up. Be persistent. This is this is for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jg Herrera. JG Miles?
I will say now is the time to start preparing for next year. I will say as a applicant that did not get selected on my first time, when results came out and my name was not on that list, I was already preparing for the next cycle. So don't wait until the last minute. Make sure that you start preparing. It hurts. I definitely can attest to that when you don't get selected. But it's important that, you know, like Lieutenant Jg Herrera alluded to, you have to get back up and keep going, making sure that you're staying competitive within your peer group. Is extremely, extremely important. Just because you didn't get selected or just because, you know, you have this goal of commissioning, you still have to make sure that you're being competitive within your peer group. Let's see, what else can I think of? I think those are pretty much the big two things, you know. Just keep pushing. It hurts. Some of us have been through it. I won't say we've all been through it, but keep going. This is just a part of your story. Oh, I do have one more thing. Do not reach out to those who were selected and ask if you can have a copy of their package. Their package is not going to help you get selected. I think that people don't realize that, and they think, okay, well, if I just copy their package since they just got selected, then I'm going to be selected. No, their package is their package. There's more to the package than, you know, just what you see on paper. So it's very important that you do the work, because when your name is on that list, you're going to have so many people that reach out to you. I looked at so many packages this year. I was like, oh my goodness, like this is extremely overwhelming. But you're only able to give, you know, the feedback and criticism if you've done the work. So do the work. You don't need anyone else's package to help you get selected.
I echo that. That's true. Thank you. JG Select Fortune.
I have to second on that, JG Miles. I have, in these past couple of days, I think I've probably received about 30 or 40 DMs about, you know, what did I do differently, and how did, you know, how is that even possible, and what can I do? And I even went ahead and made a whole YouTube video. So now when I get asked, I could just copy and paste that link and send it to them, and that can kind of be their motivation on, you know, what they can do to make their package better. But one thing I would definitely say is to continue to do your job. Just because you're putting in this package, you have to be mindful that you still have a job to do. And you want to make sure that you don't lose sight of doing that job. When I first put in my package and I found that I wasn't selected, and I looked at my supervisor and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm putting in my package again." And she said, "But we have people to put in the Navy." So I was like, okay, well, I'll just go ahead and do it on my off time. So I had to find that balance between struggling to do all these internships and try to get these volunteer hours in and do these interviews and take this trip down to Albany and still have time to do my job and be a parent. So never lose sight of that, because at the end of the day, that CO, your CO is going to have to write your endorsement, and you want to be able to have that CO write a very good endorsement for you, and not just something where they remember that you slacked off on your job because you paid so much attention to your package.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Great words. Ensign Leidenweber.
Yeah, so as we're on the topic of asking people for their package, I did that, right? Because my first time submitting, I'm like, I don't even know what to do. And I will say that they didn't do anything for me. Like the only thing that they did was that made sure that I crossed my T's and dotted my I's and that I had everything in it. But my personal statement was like reading their stuff. I'm like, that doesn't sound like me. So I was one of those people, and they didn't offer me anything. So anyone who is reaching out, like, your package is going to be your package. So I wrote down a few things just to kind of go over. So on your interviews, since we're talking about interviews, be humbly confident in your responses and like who you are. It's a fine line to be confident and not cocky, and to also be humble. So trying to master that before you go into your interviews. I've talked to a bunch of sailors who are like, especially when I was a detailer, they would tell me that they didn't want to go to sea duty because they're putting in an officer package. What you do while you're enlisted matters, and they want to see that you have sustained superior performance. So don't think that you can just sit idly. what you do as during your enlisted time matters. Write as if you're educated. So if you're going to write your personal statement and you're going to have someone look at it, whether or not it just be me as an ensign or the captain that you're going in for an interview with, make sure that your grammar is correct and that you sound as if you are educated and that what you're presenting is appropriate for the level in which you're trying to become. I've read a lot of personal statements that have grammatical errors in them, and they kind of sound as if they're written at a high school level. And the Navy's kind of done that to us with our evals and shortening things up. So it's real. I don't fault the sailors for having that kind of writing style, but we have to remember that you're trying to become an officer now. So present yourself as if you're already writing at that level and speaking at that level, because there is a difference. And last thing, take on jobs that resemble MSC type or HCA or whatever field you're going into. Take on different tasks or jobs that resemble something that you could do as an MSC officer to add to your package or your evals. So if there's always this joke about like Excel spreadsheets as an MSC officer. So maybe try to master Excel spreadsheets or do some sort of task that is big Navy, that adds value to big Navy medicine. So that way, when you do submit your package, the board can see, hey, she's not just seeing patients or taking blood pressure. She's, putting together a whole COVID, whatever. This is how her spreadsheet for supply impacted the entire hospital to be able to mitigate this, COVID pandemic. So think big picture when you're taking on new assignments or volunteering for things. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Awesome. Great advice. Like, I hope that everybody that's listening, I was getting goosebumps with some of these advice, and I'm like, if I met these individuals, I mean, you guys added so much value. And for those people that ask me on like same thing, I get a lot of like, DMs and, hey, can you tell me about this? And I created a playlist of all of these Zoom meetings. And you just send it to them. It's like, look over this. If you have additional questions, then we can start talking. Because the important part on here for those that are listening right now and that will be watching this is do your research and prepare, right? There's tons of resources out there for you. But if you don't do the work, we will know. And the MSC community is big, but it's also small, right? I know people that will reach out to me and be like, hey, Aaron, this person's going to reach out to you, but I already told them what's wrong with them. They're going to try to, get that good feeling kind of thing. And don't look for the people that are going to give you the good feeling. Look for people that are going to give you the truth, right? That, yes, your OIC thinks you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's great, but does that help you? Like, you need somebody, I'm not saying look for the Cruella de Vil that's going to like tore you apart, but look for somebody that's going to be like, here's what's missing to the piece of the puzzle kind of thing. Look for those type of feedback, and don't look for people that are just going to give you 100s all the time, where in fact there's a lot that needs to be completed for that. But thank you so much to our panel. I know you are busy individuals. Thank you so much for what you're doing to our aspiring MSCs and giving back to our community. For those of you that are tuning in, we are going to be doing this on a weekly basis. Like I said, we are doing this systematically, right? So there's a method to our madness when we do these videos. So expect some of these people to probably pop up again and new faces in our next videos. So thank you so much. Thank you, panel. Appreciate it. Have a good Thursday or Friday.
Thank you.
Right. Bye.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, sir. Bye.
Bye.